Hello and welcome to another edition of Another Book Review. This week I'll be reviewing Story Trumps Structure by Stephen James. Talk very briefly about the author, go into an overview about what the book is about, talk about what I liked about the book, what I didn't like about the book, who I'd recommend the book to, and we'll end there this week. I'm not quite sure what I'll be reading for next time. Stephen James is an author of, a fairly celebrated author of suspense and thrillers. He's won several awards for his writing. He's done a ton of nonfiction stuff as well. My understanding is this book, Story Trumps Structure, is still his most famous work. This came out in 2014. And really what it is his writing craft book. A lot of it, I think, is geared pretty well to beginning writers. He has some good sections on what makes a story a story. He has his own version of, very similar to the Campbellian monomyth, he has a version of that kind of illustrate different types of what makes the parts of that make up a story. As far as things that I think he does really well, he has a section on what he calls pebble versus putty, meaning different types of characters, some who change throughout the story and others who don't, and how those two will help really guide you into your writing. I think there's a section here on how to fix plot points that he puts at the end of the book that is kind of a guide that you can use and really use his book as a reference manual to really tighten up your writing as you're going through it to fix the plot points. That I thought was a really cool reference. He has a section on dilemmas that I thought was really good and was probably one of the highlights of the book as far as ways to think about making your character feel like they have real choice and agency, but also make them feel torn between two things at the same time. I thought that was really good. Overall, I thought the points of the book that were strong to me, I think it's very readable. I think it's very easy, accessible language for someone who maybe is just looking to get into writing to pick up. In some ways, it's very different than the last book I reviewed, which was Reading Like a Writer by Francine Prose. I'll leave a link below to that book if you want to check that review out. He doesn't use a lot of classical examples. He uses a lot of examples from his own writing. He uses some examples from other craft books, but he doesn't really use the classics as kind of a base for his writing. Things I didn't like about it as much. The book is 300 pages long. It feels like at times it felt like the chapters were a little repetitive. I think he could have trimmed out, I'd say 10 to 20% of each of the chapters because it feels like he's repeating the same information in that chapter again and again. There's a chapter on his discovery process that you either will be helpful to you if you're trying to find out your style as a writer, or it will be frustrating to you if you're someone who has a style already, especially if that style is plotting. Stephen James has a bit of a chip on his shoulder in terms of his feelings towards plotters, rightly or wrongly. This came out in 2014, so I'm sure even then I'm sure Stephen knew people who were plotters, but kind of clearly from his writing, he is a discovery writer and feels that's the superior way to go about doing these things, and it's worked for him. He's published quite a bit of books, so good on him. It does feel a little prescriptive in the sense that I think he does come out and say at one point, I believe that this writing method is the superior way to do it. So take that for what it's worth. I also felt like, in a similar vein, I don't want to say he was dismissive of literary fiction, but I think most of the advice that he has in here in terms of twist, in terms of tension, in terms of those things, really lend itself well to suspense writing and thrillers and literary fiction. And there's a lot of other works that I consider valuable and worth reading that don't really necessarily rely on twists and suspense and thrills. So some of that I didn't feel was particularly all that useful. But if you are someone who writes in those genres, I do think it's helpful just to see how someone who does it goes about creating tension and how they view escalation and de-escalation and motivation and things of that nature. I thought that was really good. So that's it. That's really the book, Story Trumps Structure. Like I said, if you're someone who is new to writing and wants a kind of a pretty handy all-in-one guide from a working writer, this book is pretty good. I think I would pair this well with Writing Without Rules. Also goes into a lot of the similar areas, and I'll put that link below if you want to check that video out. This one is really more focused on the craft end of things and doesn't go into how to sell your book and things of that nature. So I think it's good in that sense. It's really just strictly a craft book and ways to think about different parts of your story. I do think that the selling point to me would be really the accessibility of it. I think it is something that you can give to someone. I don't know if this is a book that I would recommend people read all the way through at once. I do think it can be a lot to take in at once because there are so many different, chapters that all deal with different parts of writing that are important. Like I said, the end chapter where he talks about the ways to fix your plot, I thought was really, really helpful. The status part, there's one part where he talks about different status of characters and always to be mindful of the status of your characters. That didn't really strike me as particularly useful or interesting, but that's also something that's in there if that's something that you find is helpful when you're trying to see how your different characters relate to one another. But overall, there are some things I agreed with it. There's some things I didn't agree with it. But that is Story Trumps Structure. Again, I think it's a good book for someone who wants something that's accessible, that maybe is just starting out. And I do think that the good thing about this is you can give it to someone who writes short stories or novels or really anything with a narrative beat to it and find something in there that will be helpful to them. I don't think it's really just necessarily something that's good for only novelists. So Story Trumps Structure by Stephen James. And we'll end it there today. I will be back in a week or two to review my next book. I'm still working through The Savage Detective, so I don't think that'll be my next one, but I may have another craft book for you. So until next time, please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'll leave those links below. Until next time, bye.